Marcus checked his phone one last time before stepping into the restaurant. Table 8. He was absolutely certain. The dimly lit corner booth seemed perfect for a first date, and when he approached, a woman in a wheelchair was already sitting there, her face brightening the moment their eyes met. She smiled at him with such genuine warmth that all his nervousness seemed to melt away instantly. Marcus awkwardly extended his hand, introduced himself, and she responded with a firm handshake and a soft, "Pleased to meet you." They fell into conversation so naturally that Marcus forgot he was supposed to be nervous. She told him about her love for old jazz records, and he found himself confessing how he'd spent the last 4 years raising his daughter alone after his wife passed away during childbirth. The words tumbled out easier than they ever had before, and she listened with an intensity that made him feel truly heard for the first time in years. 47 minutes passed like 7, filled with laughter and comfortable silences that didn't feel awkward at all. She shared stories about the photography she used to do before her accident, the way her hands still itched to hold a camera even though they shook too much now. Marcus showed her pictures of his daughter Emma, a gap-toothed 8-year-old who wanted to be an astronaut specifically so she could teach aliens about pizza. The woman across from him laughed so hard she had to wipe tears from her eyes, and Marcus thought to himself that maybe, just maybe, his co-workers had been right to force him onto this dating app. Then everything shattered. A tall woman in an elegant black dress appeared at their table, her expression a mixture of confusion and barely contained fury. Behind her stood a man in an expensive suit who looked equally bewildered. The woman in black spoke first, her voice sharp and cutting through the ambient music like a knife. "Are you Marcus Weber?" Marcus felt his stomach drop as he stammered out a yes, his mind already racing to figure out what was happening. "I'm Jennifer, your date from the app. I've been sitting at table 15 for over an hour." The words hit Marcus like a physical blow, and he grabbed his phone with trembling hands, pulling up the reservation confirmation. Table 15, not table 8. The number seemed to mock him from the screen. The man in the expensive suit cleared his throat and addressed the woman Marcus had been talking to. "And you must be Sofia Loran. I'm Thomas Brennan. Your mother arranged this meeting through a professional matchmaking service." Marcus watched as the color drained from Sofia's face, watched as she looked between him and the two angry people at their table, watched as reality crashed down on both of them. They had been at completely different tables, meant for completely different people, and now their perfect evening was revealed to be built on nothing but a stupid mistake. Jennifer's voice rose with each word as she berated Marcus for making her wait, for not answering her texts, for being so incompetent he couldn't even read a table number correctly. She looked at Sofia with undisguised contempt before storming off, her heels clicking against the marble floor like gunshots. Thomas, the hired date, gave Sofia a calculating look and mentioned that her mother had paid him quite handsomely to be there, that he was equipped to handle her situation, gesturing vaguely toward her wheelchair in a way that made Marcus's hands clench into fists. Marcus stood up abruptly, placing himself between Thomas and Sofia without even thinking about it. His voice came out low and dangerous as he told Thomas to leave, that Sofia didn't need someone who talked about her like she was a problem to be solved. Thomas raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by this construction worker trying to tell him what to do, but something in Marcus's expression made him back down. He left with a curt nod and a parting comment about calling Sofia's mother. The silence that followed felt suffocating. Marcus slowly sat back down, and Sofia spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "My mother set this up. She's been trying to get me to date for years, and I refused every introduction, so she went behind my back and hired someone." Marcus felt his heart breaking for her, understanding instantly how betrayed she must feel, but also feeling the crushing weight of his own embarrassment. He'd crashed someone else's arranged date, spent nearly an hour pouring his heart out to a woman who thought he was someone else entirely. Sofia looked up at him then, and to his surprise, there were tears in her eyes but also the hint of a smile. "I'm glad you sat at the wrong table," she said quietly, and Marcus felt something shift in his chest. They talked for another 20 minutes, this time with complete honesty about who they were and how they'd ended up in this situation. Sofia revealed her last name, Loran, and Marcus recognized it immediately because everyone knew about the Loran family and their global real estate empire worth billions. His hands started sweating as he realized he'd just spent the evening with someone so far out of his social class, they might as well be from different planets. Sofia must have seen the panic in his eyes because she reached across the table and took his hand. "Does it change who I am?" she asked, echoing the exact question he'd asked her earlier about her wheelchair. "Does having money change the fact that I love jazz and rainy afternoons? Does it change the person sitting across from you right now?" Marcus swallowed hard and admitted no, it didn't change anything. But he also had to be honest with her. He was a construction foreman living in a cramped 2-bedroom apartment with his daughter, barely making rent most months, working double shifts just to keep them fed and clothed. He was exactly the kind of person Sofia's mother probably spent her life keeping away from her daughter. Sofia squeezed his hand tighter and said it didn't matter to her, that money had never made her happy, that her mother's wealth had only ever made her feel more isolated and alone. They exchanged numbers before leaving, and Marcus watched as a driver picked Sofia up in a car that cost more than he'd make in a decade. But when he got home that night and collapsed into bed, there was already a text message waiting. "Thank you for sitting at the wrong table. Best mistake ever." Marcus found himself smiling in the darkness, his heart doing something complicated and hopeful in his chest. Over the next 3 weeks, they met 9 times, each date cementing the connection between them, making the impossible feel possible. But Marcus hadn't introduced Sofia to Emma yet, terrified of what it would mean if his daughter got attached and things didn't work out, terrified of risking her heart when she'd already lost so much. Emma started asking questions though, noticing how her father smiled more, hummed while cooking breakfast, checked his phone with an expression she hadn't seen in years. "Do you have a girlfriend, Daddy?" she asked one morning, and Marcus nearly spit out his coffee. He crouched down beside her chair and explained that yes, he'd met someone named Sofia, but he wanted to make sure she was nice before introducing them. Emma considered this with the seriousness only an 8-year-old could muster, then asked the most important question: "Does she like astronauts?" Marcus promised to find out, and when he texted Sofia about Emma's question, her response came immediately. "I love astronauts, especially ones who want to teach aliens about pizza. When can I meet her?" That simple message made Marcus's chest feel too tight, made him realize he was falling in love with a woman he'd met by complete accident, made him wonder if maybe the universe had put him at the wrong table for exactly the right reason. He arranged for them to meet at the park the following weekend, his heart pounding with nervous energy. But neither Marcus nor Sofia knew that Catherine Laurent, Sofia's mother, had already been watching them, had already hired investigators to follow Marcus, to photograph him with Emma, to compile a detailed report on every aspect of his life. Catherine sat in her glass office that overlooked the city, studying the photos with cold calculation, seeing not a man who loved her daughter but a threat that needed to be eliminated. And she knew exactly how to do it. The park meeting was everything Marcus had hoped for and everything he'd feared simultaneously. Emma had been shy at first, hiding behind his legs when she saw Sofia's wheelchair, but curiosity won out over nervousness within minutes. His daughter approached Sofia with that intense, unfiltered focus children have when examining something new, and asked the most direct question possible: "Why can't you walk?" Sofia didn't flinch or sugarcoat her answer. She explained simply that she'd been in a riding accident when she was 20, that her back had been injured badly, and now she used a wheelchair to get around. Emma listened with rapt attention, then asked if she could examine the chair, running her small fingers over the wheels and asking about every button and mechanism. Then she looked up at Sofia with her gap-toothed grin and declared, "You're kind of like a cyborg. Part human, part machine. That's actually really cool." Sofia laughed with such genuine delight that Marcus felt his heart expand in his chest, watching these two people he loved already forming their own connection. They spent 3 hours at the park, playing modified games that Emma invented on the spot to make sure Sofia could participate. Emma decided Sofia should be home base in tag, and she shrieked with laughter as Marcus chased her around the playground while she dove for Sofia's wheelchair at the last possible second to claim safety. When Emma finally wore herself out, she climbed into Sofia's lap without asking permission, resting her head against Sofia's shoulder with the easy affection of a child who'd already decided this person was safe. "Are you going to be my dad's girlfriend?" Emma asked with characteristic bluntness, and Marcus wanted to disappear into the ground from embarrassment. But Sofia looked at him over Emma's head, something vulnerable and hopeful in her expression, and said that she'd like that very much if it was okay with Emma. His daughter sat bolt upright, suddenly wide awake, and started planning their future with the enthusiasm of someone organizing a space mission. They could have movie nights and Sofia could read bedtime stories, and maybe they could all get matching pajamas with planets on them. Marcus tried to slow her down, but he was smiling so hard his face hurt, and when Sofia reached for his hand across the space between them, he took it without hesitation. That evening, after Emma was finally asleep following a marathon storytelling session about astronauts and aliens, Sofia called him. Her voice was thick with emotion as she told him how amazing Emma was, how she'd never felt so comfortable around a child before, how for the first time since her accident she'd felt like maybe she could have this, a family, love, all the normal things she thought she'd lost forever. Marcus gripped the phone tighter and told her she hadn't lost anything, that she was still whole, still the same person, just with a different way of moving through the world. Sofia whispered that she was falling for both of them, and Marcus felt his own eyes burning as he admitted they were falling for her too. Neither of them knew that at that exact moment, Catherine Laurent was reviewing surveillance photos of their park visit. Her jaw clenched so tight it ached. The images showed Marcus pushing Sofia's wheelchair, Emma sitting in Sofia's lap, the three of them looking like a ready-made family, and Catherine felt cold rage settle in her stomach. She built a global empire from almost nothing after her husband died, taking a small property development company and turning it into a multi-billion-dollar powerhouse through sheer will and ruthless decision-making. She hadn't done it by being soft or trusting people who wanted something from her family. The investigator's report lay open on her desk, and she read through it again with clinical detachment. Marcus Weber, age 34, construction foreman at Riverside Development, widower with significant debt, daughter requiring expensive orthodontic treatment he couldn't afford, working 70-hour weeks just to make rent, no social media presence, no criminal record, no connections to wealth or power. To Catherine, it all added up to one thing: a desperate man who'd somehow discovered her daughter's identity and positioned himself to take advantage of her vulnerability. She'd seen it before, too many times to count. Men who thought they could marry into wealth by targeting women they perceived as easy marks. Sofia's wheelchair made her seem vulnerable, isolated, desperate for affection, and Catherine knew how cruel the world could be. The photos made her jaw clench harder. Sofia looked happier than Catherine had seen her in the 9 years since the accident, and that was precisely what made this situation so dangerous. Sofia wanted normalcy so badly that she couldn't see what was obvious to anyone with experience. This man had engineered this entire chance meeting to worm his way into their lives and their fortune. Catherine picked up her phone and made a series of calls, her voice cold and businesslike. First to the private investigator, demanding deeper background checks, financial records, employment history, everything that could reveal the truth about Marcus Weber's intentions. Then to her head of security, arranging an unexpected site inspection at Riverside Development under the guise of evaluating potential property investments. She would handle this herself, face to face, because that was how Catherine dealt with threats to her family. She'd look this man in the eyes and know for certain whether he was genuine or a con artist, and if her instincts told her he was dangerous, she would eliminate the threat by whatever means necessary. Marcus was reviewing structural blueprints the next afternoon when the black luxury sedan pulled up to the construction site, and his foreman immediately started barking orders to clean up and look professional. The woman who emerged from the car moved with the kind of authority that made grown men straighten their shoulders and check their appearance. She wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus's truck, and her eyes swept the construction site with calculating precision. When she introduced herself as Catherine Laurent and requested a site tour, Marcus felt his blood turn to ice water. This was Sofia's mother, here at his workplace, and he knew instantly this wasn't about property development. They walked the site together, Catherine asking pointed technical questions that Marcus answered professionally despite his racing heart, explaining load calculations and timeline projections and safety protocols. She was testing him, he realized, trying to determine if he actually knew what he was doing or if he was faking competence. When they reached a quiet corner of the site away from other workers, Catherine dropped all pretense of friendliness. Her expression went cold and hard as she told Marcus she knew exactly who he was and, more importantly, what he was. A gold digger who'd targeted her daughter, who'd somehow discovered Sofia's identity and engineered this entire romance to get access to the Laurent fortune. Marcus started to protest, but Catherine cut him off with a sharp gesture and pulled an envelope from her bag. $150,000, she said flatly, her voice devoid of emotion. Cash transfer to any account you specify. Take it, disappear from Sofia's life completely, and we'll consider this matter closed. If you refuse, I will systematically destroy everything you've built. I'll have you fired. I'll have your apartment lease terminated. I'll have every door in this city closed to you. I will make your life so difficult that you'll wish you'd never heard the name Laurent. Marcus stared at the envelope like it was a venomous snake, his hands trembling with anger and fear. That much money would solve every problem in his life, would pay for Emma's orthodontics, would clear his debts, would give them breathing room for the first time in years. But taking it would mean losing Sofia, would mean proving Catherine right about him, would mean teaching Emma that love could be bought and sold like a commodity. He looked Catherine Laurent directly in the eyes and told her no, he wouldn't take her blood money, that he loved Sofia for who she was, not what she had, and nothing she could do would make him walk away. Catherine's smile was sharp and dangerous as she promised him he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life, and Marcus walked away with his heart pounding and his future suddenly very uncertain. Marcus didn't tell Sofia about the confrontation with her mother, convincing himself it would only hurt her and force her to choose between them. He carried the weight of Catherine's threats alone, checking his phone obsessively for the inevitable axe to fall, jumping every time his foreman called his name. The tension made him irritable and distracted, and Sofia noticed immediately during their next date at the small jazz club they'd started frequenting. She kept asking if something was wrong, her hand warm on his arm, her eyes searching his face with growing concern. Marcus lied and said he was just tired from work, hating himself for the deception but unable to find the words to tell her the truth. How could he explain that her mother had tried to bribe him, that he'd refused, that now he was waiting for retaliation he had no way to prevent? Sofia deserved honesty, but Marcus told himself he was protecting her from unnecessary pain, that he could handle this himself the way he'd handled everything since his wife died. That night, Sofia texted him repeatedly, sensing something was deeply wrong, and Marcus sent back short responses that only made her more worried. He lay awake until 3 a.m, staring at the ceiling of his cramped bedroom, listening to Emma's soft breathing from the room next door, wondering how long he had before Catherine made good on her threats. The answer came 4 days later when his foreman Tom called him into the site office with an expression that made Marcus's stomach drop. Tom closed the door and couldn't meet Marcus's eyes as he explained that corporate had called that morning with termination orders effective immediately. Marcus felt the room tilt around him, his hands gripping the edge of the desk so hard his knuckles went white. He demanded to know why, what he'd done wrong, and Tom shook his head with obvious distress. "Nothing, Marcus. You're the best foreman we've had in 15 years. Your sections are always ahead of schedule, under budget, with perfect safety records. I fought for you, called corporate 3 times, but the order came from so high up that my boss wouldn't even discuss it. Someone with serious power wants you gone, and there's nothing I can do." Marcus knew exactly who that someone was, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a physical blow. He cleaned out his locker mechanically, removing the photos of Emma he kept taped inside, the work gloves that had molded to his hands over years of use, the hard hat with Emma's sticker collection covering one side. His crew watched with confused sympathy, some offering handshakes and job recommendations, all of them knowing this firing made no sense whatsoever. In his truck, Marcus let his head fall against the steering wheel and allowed himself 5 minutes to feel the crushing fear of not knowing how he'd pay rent, buy food, keep Emma in daycare, afford the orthodontic work she desperately needed. Then he pulled himself together and started making calls, sending out applications, reaching out to every contact in the construction industry he'd cultivated over 15 years. But word traveled fast, and getting fired raised questions that made potential employers hesitant. Most positions available paid half what he'd been making, entry-level labor instead of supervisory roles, and Marcus felt his carefully constructed life crumbling like a building with faulty foundations. Sofia texted asking about dinner. saying Emma had been asking about their next adventure together, and Marcus stared at the message for 10 full minutes before responding that he couldn't make it, that he had things to handle. He couldn't face her right now, couldn't pretend everything was fine when his world was falling apart, couldn't look into her eyes and lie about why he was really pulling away. That evening after he picked Emma up from daycare, his daughter immediately sensed something was wrong. She wrapped her small arms around his neck and asked why he looked so sad, why he wasn't smiling anymore like he had been when Sofia came into their lives. Marcus held her tight and told her everything would be okay. Another lie that tasted bitter on his tongue. But what else could he say? That they might lose their apartment, that he couldn't afford her dental work, that the woman who made him happy came with a mother who would stop at nothing to destroy them? 2 days later, the phone call came that Marcus had been dreading. A woman from Child Protective Services introduced herself as Linda Morrison and explained that they'd received a complaint about Emma's living situation, about potential neglect and inability to provide adequate care due to recent unemployment. Marcus felt his blood turn to ice as she scheduled a mandatory home inspection for the following afternoon. He spent the entire night cleaning their small apartment with manic energy, scrubbing every surface, organizing closets, making everything look as perfect as possible despite the peeling paint he couldn't afford to fix and the broken window latch he'd been meaning to repair for months. The social worker arrived exactly on time, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a clipboard that might as well have been a weapon. She inspected every inch of their apartment, photographing the cramped quarters, opening the refrigerator to document the sparse contents, asking questions about childcare arrangements and financial stability that Marcus answered as calmly as he could manage. When she asked to interview Emma separately, Marcus felt his heart nearly stop, but he had no choice but to agree. He waited in the hallway outside Emma's bedroom for 20 agonizing minutes, listening to the muffled sound of voices, trying to hear if his daughter was scared or confused. When the social worker finally emerged, her expression was carefully neutral as she explained she had significant concerns about the current situation. The combination of recent job loss, financial instability, inadequate housing conditions, and limited support systems raised red flags that couldn't be ignored. She would need to file a report and schedule a follow-up visit in 2 weeks, and if the situation hadn't substantially improved by then, they would need to discuss alternative care arrangements for Emma. The words alternative care arrangements echoed in Marcus's head like a death sentence. After the social worker left, Marcus sat on the floor of Emma's room surrounded by the furniture he'd built with his own hands, the bookshelf he'd painted with stars and planets, the bed frame he'd constructed from plans he found online, and felt something break inside him. He'd survived his wife's death, survived 4 years of single parenthood and poverty, survived every challenge life had thrown at him, but this might be the thing that finally destroyed him. Catherine Laurent was going to take his daughter, and he had no idea how to stop her. His phone buzzed with another message from Sofia, more urgent now, begging him to talk to her, telling him she knew something was seriously wrong and she needed to help. Marcus stared at the message for a long time, his vision blurring with tears he refused to let fall while Emma might see. He finally typed out a response asking Sofia to meet him at the park where they'd had that perfect afternoon with Emma, where everything had still seemed possible. Sofia arrived before he did, her face etched with worry and fear, and Marcus sat beside her wheelchair on the bench where they'd watched Emma play. He told her everything then, unable to carry the weight alone anymore. The confrontation with Catherine, the bribe, the systematic destruction of his life, the looming threat of losing Emma to the foster system. Sofia's face cycled through shock and disbelief and finally settled on rage so fierce it almost frightened him. She grabbed her phone immediately, her hands shaking as she said she was calling her mother right now, that this ended tonight, but Marcus caught her wrist gently. If she confronted Catherine directly without proof, it would only make things worse, would give Catherine plausible deniability, would potentially accelerate the timeline for taking Emma away. They sat in heavy silence for several minutes while Sofia cried and Marcus tried to find words for what he had to say next. Finally, he forced the words out even though they felt like swallowing broken glass. "I think we need to step back for a while. If your mother sees we're not together anymore, maybe she'll leave me alone long enough to get stable again, find a new job, pass the inspection. It's the only way I can protect Emma." Sofia looked at him like he'd struck her, tears streaming down her face as she said absolutely not. She wasn't letting Catherine win, wasn't letting her drive them apart. But Marcus cut her off, his voice breaking as he explained this wasn't about winning. It was about Emma, about the fact that he'd rather lose Sofia than lose his daughter because Emma was everything, his entire reason for breathing, and if Catherine took her away, he'd have nothing left. Sofia begged him to let her help financially, said she had more money than she could ever spend, could pay his rent and Emma's medical bills and hire the best lawyers. But Marcus refused flatly. Taking her money would prove Catherine right about his intentions, would validate every terrible thing she believed about him. He stood up slowly, every movement feeling like it required enormous effort, and told Sofia he loved her, but he loved Emma more, that he had to love her more, because that's what parents did. He walked away from the bench, from Sofia crying alone in the park, and hated himself more than he'd ever hated anything in his life. What neither Marcus nor Sofia knew was that Emma had followed her father that evening, worried about the sadness that had been radiating from him like a physical presence for days. She'd pretended to be asleep when Marcus asked his mother to watch her, then quietly slipped out and hid in the back of his truck under an old blanket she found there. Emma had become an expert at being invisible when she needed to be, a skill developed from years of not wanting to burden her father with her own fears and questions. She'd crept out of the truck after Marcus parked at the park, hiding behind trees and playground equipment, getting close enough to hear their conversation even if she didn't understand all the words. What she did understand was that the mean lady, Sofia's mother, was trying to take her away from her daddy, and it was happening because daddy loved Sofia. Emma had lost her mother before she was even old enough to remember her, had grown up with only photographs and stories to fill that void, and now she'd found someone who could maybe be a mother to her, someone who laughed at her space jokes and didn't mind that she talked too much about aliens. The thought of losing both Sofia and her father because of some mean woman she'd never even met made something fierce and determined settle in Emma's chest. Adults were clearly terrible at fixing their own problems, she decided with the simple logic of an 8-year-old, so she would have to fix it herself. Emma spent 2 days planning, listening carefully when the social worker visited again and mentioned something about hospitals and the Loron family owning important buildings all over the city. She knew about hospitals because that's where her mother had died, and Daddy always got quiet and sad when they drove past the big medical center downtown. But hospitals were also where sick people went to get better, where broken things got fixed, and maybe if she could get to the hospital, she could find Sofia's mother and fix whatever was broken inside her that made her so mean. On the third morning, while her grandmother was busy in the garden, Emma took $7 from the emergency money jar in the kitchen and slipped out the front door with her backpack containing her favorite stuffed astronaut and a drawing she'd made of her, Daddy, and Sofia together. She'd watched people take buses dozens of times, and it seemed simple enough. You gave the driver money and told them where you wanted to go. The bus driver looked skeptical when an 8-year-old climbed aboard alone, but Emma put on her most serious face and explained she needed to get to the hospital for something very important. The driver's expression shifted to concern as he asked if she was hurt or needed an ambulance, and Emma said no, she wasn't hurt, but she needed to see someone at the hospital about a really serious family emergency. The driver radioed his supervisor, and they made the decision to take her to the main hospital downtown where staff could figure out what was happening and contact her family. Emma didn't correct them when they assumed she needed medical help, figuring she'd explain everything once she got there and found Sofia's mother. At the hospital, nurses brought Emma to a small consultation room with cartoon characters painted on the walls, asking gentle questions about her name and who she was trying to see. Emma sat up straight in the chair, trying to look older and more mature than her 8 years, and explained that she needed to talk to Catherine Loron because she was Sofia's mother and she was being mean and making Emma's daddy sad. The nurse's eyebrows shot up at the name Loron, and she exchanged a significant look with another staff member before making a phone call in a low voice. Within 15 minutes, everything changed dramatically. Emma found herself in a completely different office, this one with expensive furniture and huge windows overlooking the entire city, and then a woman walked in who looked like she'd never smiled in her entire life. She wore a suit that was so perfectly pressed it looked uncomfortable, and her eyes were the coldest eyes Emma had ever seen, like looking at a frozen lake. Catherine Loron sat down across from Emma, studying her with an expression that made Emma want to squirm, but she forced herself to stay still and brave. "Hello, Emma," Catherine said in a voice that was trying to be gentle but came out more like ice cracking. "I understand you were looking for me. Why don't you tell me what this is about?" Emma took a deep breath and squared her small shoulders, remembering how her daddy always said the truth was the most important thing even when it was hard to say. "Are you the mean lady who's trying to take me away from my daddy?" Catherine blinked, clearly not expecting such directness, and Emma pressed on before she could lose her nerve. "I heard Daddy telling Sofia everything. You made him lose his job, so we don't have money anymore. You sent people to look at our apartment and say it's not good enough. You're trying to make it so Daddy can't keep me. And that's mean and wrong because my daddy is the best daddy in the whole world." The words tumbled out faster now, for years of fear and love and fierce protectiveness all spilling over at once. "Daddy makes me breakfast even when we don't have much food, and he gives me his portions so I can have more. He built my entire bedroom with his own hands, every single piece of furniture, because he wanted it to be special. He reads me 3 stories every night even when he's so tired he can barely keep his eyes open. He never makes me feel bad that Mommy died when I was born, even though I know it makes him sad every single day. And Sofia makes him smile again for the first time since Mommy died, and I love seeing him smile. So why are you being so mean? Why don't you want them to be happy?" Catherine was very quiet for a long moment, her perfectly composed expression cracking slightly around the edges as she stared at this fierce, brave child who'd somehow found her way across the city alone to confront her. Emma pulled out her drawing from her backpack, the one showing the 3 of them together with a big heart around them, and pushed it across the desk toward Catherine. "This is us being a family. Daddy and Sofia and me. We're happy here, see? But you're trying to break it all apart, and I don't understand why grown-ups do things that make people sad when you could just let people be happy instead." Catherine picked up the drawing with hands that weren't quite steady, studying the crayon figures with unexpected emotion crossing her face. She saw herself in this child's fierce protectiveness, remembering when she'd been young and would have fought the world to protect her own daughter. "How did you get here, Emma?" Catherine asked, her voice softer now. "Did your father bring you?" Emma shook her head and explained about the buses and the nice lady who helped her transfer, and Catherine felt something cold settle in her stomach as she realized this 8-year-old had crossed the city alone, driven by desperation to save her family. "Does your father know where you are?" Catherine asked, already reaching for her phone, and Emma admitted he didn't, that he was probably looking for jobs and worrying about money and didn't know she'd left. Catherine made several calls in quick succession, her voice crisp and businesslike, arranging for Marcus to be located and brought to the hospital immediately. Then she did something that surprised even herself. She pulled up the surveillance footage from the restaurant where Marcus and Sofia had first met, footage she'd watched a dozen times looking for evidence of manipulation and deception. This time she watched it differently, not looking for what she wanted to see, but for what was actually there. She saw genuine confusion when the real dates arrived, saw 2 people who'd stumbled into each other's lives by complete accident, saw her daughter's face light up with joy for the first time in 9 years. She watched the way Marcus listened to Sofia like every word mattered, the way he showed her pictures of Emma with obvious pride and love, the way he refused Sofia's offers to pay for dinner because his stubborn pride wouldn't let him accept what felt like charity. Catherine pulled up the investigator's full report and forced herself to read the sections she'd dismissed before, the parts that didn't fit her narrative. Marcus had never Googled Sofia or the Laurent family, had never shown any interest in their wealth, had in fact actively avoided accepting financial help from anyone his entire adult life. When his wife died, her parents had offered to help raise Emma, offering money and support, and Marcus had turned them down, insisting on doing it himself even though it meant years of poverty and exhaustion. This wasn't a con artist. This was a man with too much pride and too much love for his daughter to accept help even when he desperately needed it. Catherine looked at Emma, still sitting bravely in the chair across from her, and felt something crack in her chest. She'd been so focused on protecting Sofia from potential threats that she'd become the threat herself, destroying a good man's life because she couldn't see past her own fear and need for control. 20 minutes later, Marcus burst through the office door like a man who'd run through fire to get there, his face wild with panic and fear that twisted Catherine's stomach with guilt. He dropped to his knees in front of Emma, pulling her into his arms so tightly she squeaked in protest, his whole body shaking as he checked her over for injuries. "Don't you ever do that again," he choked out, his voice breaking on every word. "Do you understand me? I thought something terrible happened. I thought I lost you. I thought." His voice gave out completely, and he just held her, tears streaming down his face openly, not caring that Catherine Laurent was watching him fall apart. Emma wrapped her small arms around his neck and whispered that she was sorry, that she just wanted to help, wanted to make the mean lady understand that he was good and they deserved to be happy. Marcus looked up at Catherine then, and the expression on his face was pure protective fury mixed with exhaustion and desperation. "Thank you for keeping her safe," he said stiffly, already starting to stand with Emma in his arms. "We'll go now and won't bother you again." Catherine held up one hand, her voice stopping him before he could reach the door. "Please, Mr. Weber, sit down. We need to talk." Marcus wanted to refuse. She could see every muscle in his body tensing to flee, but Emma tugged on his shirt and whispered that they should listen, that maybe the mean lady wasn't so mean anymore. Marcus sat slowly on the edge of the leather chair, keeping Emma on his lap like he was afraid someone might try to take her, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face with wary suspicion. Catherine took a breath and did something she rarely did in business or in life. She admitted she was wrong. "Your daughter came here today and told me some things that made me reconsider my assumptions about you." Catherine began carefully, her voice steadier than she felt. "She told me about the breakfast you make when you don't have enough food, about the bedroom furniture you built by hand, about the stories you read every night when you're exhausted. She showed me a drawing of her family, and it included my daughter Sofia." Catherine's voice softened despite herself. "I've spent the past 2 weeks trying to protect Sofia from what I believed was someone who would hurt her, use her, take advantage of her vulnerability and her wealth. But I've been looking for evidence to support my assumptions instead of seeing what was actually in front of me." She pulled up the restaurant footage on her computer and turned the screen so Marcus could see, showing him the moment he sat down at the wrong table, the genuine confusion when the real dates arrived, the natural chemistry between him and Sofia that couldn't be faked. "I had you fired from your job, Mr. Weber. I made the anonymous complaint to Child Protective Services. I've been systematically trying to destroy your life to drive you away from my daughter." Catherine met his eyes directly, refusing to hide from the magnitude of what she'd done. "And I was completely, devastatingly wrong about you. You're not a con artist or a gold digger. You're a good man who loves my daughter for who she is. And you make her happier than I've seen her since before her accident 9 years ago." Marcus stared at her like he couldn't quite process the words, his mouth opening and closing without sound, and Catherine continued before she could lose her nerve. "I've already made calls to withdraw the CPS complaint. It will be officially closed within the hour. As for your job, I can't give you back the position at Riverside without causing problems for people who weren't involved in this, but I can offer you something else." Marcus's expression immediately hardened with suspicion. "I don't want your charity or your guilt money. I won't be bought off." Catherine actually smiled slightly at that, seeing the stubborn pride that had gotten him through years of hardship. "It's not charity, Mr. Weber. It's a genuine job offer. Vice President of Construction Development for Laurent Properties International. $280,000 annually, full benefits package, company vehicle, relocation assistance if needed." Marcus's face went pale, then flushed with anger. "That's not a real job. That's you trying to buy forgiveness and control the situation." Catherine pulled out a folder she'd prepared during the wait for Marcus to arrive, sliding it across the desk toward him. "Before I had you fired, I called your supervisor at Riverside, not to gather information for my investigation, but because I wanted to know if you were actually competent or just putting on a good show. He told me you're the best construction foreman he's worked with in 20 years, that your projects are always ahead of schedule and under budget, that you have perfect safety records, that your crew would follow you into a burning building. We've been searching for someone to fill this VP position for 18 months, and no one we've interviewed has the combination of technical expertise, leadership ability, and integrity we need." Marcus shook his head stubbornly, his jaw set in a hard line. "Even if that's true, I can't accept it. Taking a job from you would prove you right about my intentions, that I was after money all along." Emma tugged on his sleeve then, her voice small but determined. "Daddy, If you take the job, we could keep our apartment and I could get my teeth fixed, and maybe we could even get a puppy like you promised. And we could help other kids too, like you always help people." She looked at Catherine with those serious eyes. "My daddy always shares. Like when we go to the park and there's kids whose parents can't buy them ice cream. Daddy always buys extra to share. Remember that time with the little boy whose mom was crying because she didn't have money? You gave him your ice cream and bought him another one and told his mom things would get better." Marcus looked stunned that Emma had noticed and remembered that moment, and Catherine felt something shift in her understanding of this man. Here was someone who gave away what little he had because he couldn't stand to see others suffer. Someone whose daughter had learned generosity from watching him sacrifice constantly for others. "I have a counterproposal," Marcus said slowly, his voice gaining strength as an idea formed. "If I accept this position, I'll take a salary of $90,000. That's more than enough for Emma and me to be stable, to cover our needs, to live comfortably. I want the remainder, $190,000, donated annually directly from the company to organizations that help single parents and children from low-income families." Catherine started to protest that he was being ridiculous, but Marcus cut her off firmly. "This is non-negotiable. You want proof I'm not interested in your money? There it is. I take only what I actually need to provide for my daughter. The rest goes to people who are struggling the way I was struggling. And I earn that salary through the quality of my work, not through my relationship with Sofia. If I'm not good at the job, you fire me. If I am good at it, I keep it based on my own merit. Those are my terms, Ms. Laurent. Take them or leave them." Catherine studied him for a long moment, seeing the fierce independence, the absolute refusal to compromise his principles even when facing financial disaster, the genuine desire to help others even from his own position of need. This was not the kind of man she'd thought she was dealing with, and shame burned hot in her chest for what she'd nearly destroyed. "Agreed," Catherine said finally, extending her hand across the desk. "And I'll match that donation from company funds. That's $380,000 annually going to help families in need, and we'll establish a foundation where you'll have input on which organizations receive funding." Marcus shook her hand, his grip firm but his expression still wary, still not quite trusting this sudden reversal. "One more thing," he said, his voice hardening. "If you ever try to manipulate Sofia's life again, if you ever try to control who she loves or how she lives, I walk away immediately and I make sure she knows exactly why. Your daughter deserves the freedom to make her own choices, and I won't be part of any dynamic where you're pulling strings behind the scenes." At that exact moment, the office door flew open and Sofia wheeled in fast, her hair disheveled and her face streaked with tears, looking between all of them with wild confusion. "Where's Emma? Your assistant said there was a child here asking for me, and I thought something terrible happened." She stopped abruptly, taking in the scene of Marcus holding Emma, Catherine standing calmly, no one looking panicked or hurt. "What's going on? Someone please tell me what's happening right now." Emma jumped off Marcus's lap and ran to Sofia, throwing her arms around her with the enthusiasm of a child who'd successfully completed a difficult mission. "I fixed it. I took 2 buses all by myself and came here and told your mommy to stop being mean. And now Daddy has a really good job, and we're not going to lose our apartment, and you can be with us forever, and maybe we can get a puppy." Sofia looked completely lost, her eyes moving from Emma to Marcus to Catherine, trying to piece together what had happened. Marcus stood slowly and moved to Sofia's side, taking her hand. "It's a very long story, but the short version is your daughter is incredibly brave and possibly insane for crossing the city alone. Your mother and I have reached an understanding, and I'm an idiot who should have trusted you enough to tell you the truth from the beginning instead of trying to protect you from ugly things." Sofia's face cycled through confusion to understanding to fury as she turned to face her mother. "You tried to destroy him. You had him fired and reported to child services and tried to take Emma away." Her voice was shaking with rage. "How could you do that? How could you be so cruel?" Catherine didn't make excuses or try to deflect the fury in her daughter's voice, and that simple acceptance of guilt seemed to surprise Sofia more than anything else could have. "You're absolutely right to be angry with me," Catherine said quietly, her usual commanding presence subdued into something that almost looked like humility. "I was cruel, I was wrong, and I nearly destroyed something precious because I was too afraid to see the truth. I don't expect you to forgive me quickly or easily, Sofia. I expect it will take a very long time before you trust me again, if you ever do. But I'm asking for the chance to try, to be better, to be the mother you deserve instead of the one who tries to control every aspect of your life out of misplaced fear. Sofia sat very still in her wheelchair, her hands gripping the armrest so tightly her knuckles went white, and Marcus could see the war playing out across her face between justified anger and the small, fragile hope that maybe her relationship with her mother could finally heal. Emma, with the emotional intelligence that children sometimes possess in startling abundance, climbed into Sofia's lap and wrapped her small arms around her neck. Your mommy made really big mistakes, but she said she's sorry and she's trying to fix them. My daddy says everybody makes mistakes, even grown-ups, and the important thing is trying to be better after. Sofia's eyes filled with tears as she held Emma close, and when she looked up at her mother, her voice was thick with emotion. I need time, Mom. A lot of time. You can't just apologize and expect everything to be okay after what you did to them, after you tried to take Emma away from Marcus. Catherine nodded, her own eyes suspiciously bright. I understand completely, and I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll prove through my actions, not just my words, that I can be better. The weeks that followed were strange and tentative, like walking across ice that might crack at any moment. But slowly something new began to build between them all. Marcus started his new position at Loron Properties and immediately proved that Catherine's faith in his abilities wasn't just guilt-driven wishful thinking. He caught a major structural flaw in a development project that would have cost millions to fix after completion, redesigned an entire building's support system to be both safer and more cost-effective, and earned the respect of his team through expertise and genuine leadership rather than family connections. The donated salary went to 3 carefully chosen organizations, and Marcus insisted on being actively involved, visiting the programs and meeting the families they helped, wanting to ensure the money created real impact. Catherine kept her word about matching the donation, and together they established a foundation that would continue long after any of them were gone. Sofia and Marcus moved in together 2 months later, after countless conversations about timing and readiness and whether they were moving too fast. Sofia's penthouse apartment was fully accessible with space for everyone, and Emma got her promised bedroom with glow-in-the-dark planets on the ceiling that Marcus installed himself. They didn't get a puppy immediately, deciding to wait until Emma proved she could handle the responsibility, but they did adopt a cat that Emma named Meteor and who seemed to think Sofia's wheelchair was the best throne in the apartment. The relationship between Sofia and Catherine healed slowly, painfully, like a broken bone that had to be reset before it could mend properly. They started having weekly dinners, just the two of them, where they talked with more honesty than they'd managed in years. Catherine learned to listen instead of command, to ask instead of assume, to respect Sofia's autonomy instead of trying to control her choices. Sofia learned that her mother's controlling behavior had come from a place of terror, from watching her daughter nearly die in that riding accident and spending 9 years afraid that any misstep would lead to more loss. Understanding didn't erase the hurt, but it helped them begin building something new and more honest between them. Emma flourished in ways that made Marcus's chest tight, with gratitude and relief every single day. She got her orthodontic treatment. She excelled in school. She made friends easily now that the stress and instability had lifted from their home. She called Sofia Mama, naturally and without prompting, and Sofia cried the first time it happened, holding Emma close and whispering that she loved her so much. Emma called Catherine Grandma Cat, which made the older woman laugh in a way her employees claimed they'd never heard before, and Catherine spoiled her granddaughter with the kind of attention she wished she'd given her own daughter at that age. For months after Marcus started his new job, Sofia had a health scare that required hospitalization for a kidney infection that spiraled dangerously fast. Marcus barely left her side for 3 days, sleeping in an uncomfortable chair by her bed, helping nurses with transfers and medications, advocating fiercely for her care when doctors tried to dismiss her pain levels. On the 3rd night, when Sofia woke at 2 in the morning struggling with nausea and discomfort, Marcus was there instantly, holding her hair back, calling for nurses, talking her through the worst of it with steady calmness. When the crisis passed and Sofia was lying exhausted against the pillows, she looked at him with something like wonder in her eyes. "You didn't have to do all this," she whispered. You could have gone home, gotten real sleep. Most people can't handle the medical complications, the reality of my disability, the unglamorous parts. Marcus brushed her hair back gently, his touch infinitely tender. Then most people are missing out on loving someone extraordinary. This isn't a burden, Sofia. You're not a burden. You're the person I love, all of you, including the parts that require extra care and patience. I'm exactly where I want to be. Sofia started crying then, tears of relief and love and gratitude streaming down her face, and Marcus held her hand through the rest of the night, keeping watch while she finally slept peacefully. 2 months later, Marcus took Sofia back to the same restaurant where they'd first met, the reservation carefully arranged with the staff ahead of time. Emma was there too, wearing her favorite dress with the sparkly stars, holding a small velvet box like it contained the secrets of the universe. They were seated at table 8, the same corner booth where their story had accidentally begun, and Sofia looked between Marcus and Emma with growing suspicion and excitement. "Do you remember the first thing you said to me?" Marcus asked, taking Sofia's hand across the table while Emma bounced excitedly in her seat. "I said yes when you asked if this was table 8, Sofia replied, her voice already unsteady because she could see where this was going. "Before that, you smiled at me like you'd been waiting, like maybe the universe had put us at the same wrong table for exactly the right reason." Marcus stood and knelt beside her wheelchair, taking both her hands in his while Emma brought over the ring box with ceremony that would have made an astronaut proud. "I sat at the wrong table that night and made what should have been an embarrassing mistake. But instead of leaving, I stayed. And I found you. I found love when I thought that part of my life was over. I found a partner who makes me better, who loves my daughter like her own, who sees possibilities instead of limitations. I found the person I want to spend the rest of my life with." His voice was shaking now, emotion making it rough. "Sofia Loren, will you marry me? Will you let me spend forever at the right table, which is anywhere you are?" Sofia was already crying, her hands trembling in his, and Emma opened the ring box to reveal a simple but beautiful diamond that caught the light like a captured star. "Yes," Sofia managed through tears and laughter. "Yes, absolutely yes, 1,000 times yes." Marcus slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands while Emma cheered loudly enough that other diners turned to look and then started applauding spontaneously when they realized what was happening. Catherine was watching from a nearby table where Marcus had secretly invited her, and she cried genuine tears seeing her daughter so completely, radiantly happy. When Marcus kissed Sofia, it tasted like joy and promise and second chances, like everything good that can happen when you take a risk on the wrong table and find exactly the right person. The wedding happened 6 months later at one of the Loren properties, a beautiful garden venue where they'd transformed an entire greenhouse into something magical. It was intimate and small, just the people who truly mattered, which was exactly what they both wanted. Emma served as flower girl with intense seriousness, carefully spreading petals while pushing a small decorated wheelchair that matched Sofia's, her idea to honor her new mother in a way that made everyone cry. Catherine walked Sofia down the aisle, both of them emotional, and when she placed Sofia's hand in Marcus's, she whispered that she was proud of her daughter and grateful to Marcus for seeing what she'd almost been too blind to recognize. Marcus's vows were simple and devastating in their honesty, his voice steady despite tears. "I promise to push your chair up every hill and ramp we encounter, to stand beside you in every challenge, to love you on the hard days and the easy ones, to be the partner you deserve and the father Emma needs. You gave me back my smile, my hope, my future. All I can give you in return is forever, and I promise to make every moment of that forever worth it." Sofia's vows broke everyone's hearts in the best way. "I promise to love you exactly as you are, stubborn and proud and terrible at remembering where you put your keys. To be patient when Emma wants to discuss alien civilizations at breakfast, and patient when you lose those keys for the 100th time. You saw me when I felt invisible, loved me when I thought I was broken, showed me that I was never broken at all. You're my best mistake, my greatest accident, my perfect wrong table." When they kissed as husband and wife, Emma cheered so loudly she startled several birds from nearby trees, yelling that she officially had a complete family now, and could they please discuss the puppy situation. The reception was filled with laughter and dancing and the kind of joy that comes from surviving darkness and choosing light. Marcus held Emma on his shoulders while Sofia watched with a heart so full it felt like it might burst, and Catherine spent the evening talking with guests about expanding their foundation's reach, already planning new programs to help more families. As the evening wound down, Marcus found Sofia on the terrace overlooking the gardens lit by thousands of string lights, and he wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Hey, wife," he said softly, and Sofia leaned back against him with a contented sigh. "Hey, husband. Any regrets about sitting at the wrong table yet?" Marcus laughed quietly. "Not even for a second. Best wrong table in the history of wrong tables." They could hear Emma's laughter from inside, could see Catherine chasing her granddaughter through the ballroom in some elaborate game only they understood, and Sofia reached up to touch Marcus's face. "You know what the best part is?" she asked. "What?" Marcus replied, kissing her temple. "If you'd sat at table 15 that night with Jennifer, you would have missed all of this. Missed us, missed this whole beautiful, complicated, perfect life we built from a simple mistake." Marcus turned her chair slightly so he could look into her eyes properly, the lights reflecting in them like captured stars. "Then here's to wrong tables and right people, to mistakes that turn into miracles, to taking chances on strangers in wheelchairs who turn out to be everything you never knew you needed." Sofia smiled, the smile that still made his heart skip after all these months, and would continue making it skip for all the years to come. "To wrong tables and right people," she agreed. And when he kissed her under those lights with their daughter's laughter floating out from inside, and their future stretching bright and infinite before them, it felt like the universe itself was celebrating the beautiful accident that had brought them all together. Sometimes the best things in life come from sitting at exactly the wrong table at exactly the right time. And sometimes the mistakes we make turn out to be the greatest blessings we could never have planned for.